okay. And it was when I was selling them and realizing that I liked to sell and that I could sell, and that I recognized that selling was about providing a service and creating value for people, that I knew that I literally back then, I knew that I could always succeed. I mean, I remember I was 16, I think, when I started a stamp company and started going to stamp shows and trade shows and just working a little bit harder than other people and trading up from one stamp to the next. I remember one time I started with a quarter and bought a stamp and left with $50, thinking, hey, if I could do this, I could do anything. And it's not that everything worked. I failed a lot, but I never ever felt like I wouldn't be able to work hard enough to succeed.
Well, you have an extreme passion for the Mavs. Even the casual viewer can see how passionate you are. Do you think that passion transcends into the way you approach business?
Yeah, I think it's the other way around. I think it was the passion I've always had for business and being an entrepreneur that transfers into the Mavs. I've always been passionate. Some people thought, it's more OCD than anything else, which I think is a great trait for an entrepreneur. When I mentioned the stamp business, I would stay up till 3, 4 in the morning, even though I had to get up and go to school, and read Lynn's Stamp News and Scott's Stamp Journals and have them all memorized and use that to give myself an edge. Even when I was in college, I'd be in the library reading business books and just looking for business biographies and just reading all I could about business. When I had Micro Solutions and I started with no money, I'd pull all-nighters in front of borrowed computers, teaching myself software and how to program. It's just, I've always just really enjoyed just the competition of business. I think, in the sports business, I'll talk to our players and it'll be like, well, you guys compete for 48 minutes and you practice a couple hours and you work on your game independently a couple hours. But the ultimate sport is business, because you have to compete with everybody. And you have to do it 24/7 by 365 days a year forever. And there's always somebody out there trying to kick your butt. There's always somebody who looks at your business and says, I can do that better. I have a better idea. And you have to compete with that person. And all the while, you have to make your customers happy, your employees happy. It's the competitive side of me that, in any entrepreneur, that I think that has to drive you. And I think that carries over into the Mavericks. I want to win and I want to compete.
Well, when you started Micro Solutions, it was a small company.
Yep.
What advice would you give small business owners?
Love what you do. I think too many people think they have to find the one idea. And there's nothing wrong with failing. I've told a lot of people, it doesn't matter how many times you fail. If you get it right, you're an overnight success. All you got to do is get it right one time, and you're that overnight success. I sold powder milk, and that was a disaster. I had my senior year project at Indiana was opening up a bar that got closed because of a wet T-shirt contest with a 16-year-old. That was a disaster, but that was good because it kept me out of the bar business. I got fired from my first job in the software business because I wanted to close a deal instead of going out and closing a sale. Instead of coming in and sweeping the floor, and so it didn't matter how many times I failed. I just kept on going and going and going. And entrepreneurs need to realize that sometimes it's not the idea, it's not who you know, it's not how much money you have access to. It's really finding something that you really love to do. I had no idea I loved computers and technology, none. I took one class in Indiana in computers and I cheated to get through it. It was Fortran. And then I bought a little PC, a 99 4A from Texas Instruments for $99. Started teaching myself to program and found, 4 hours later, 5 hours later, I would look up and I'd been working this entire time and I loved it. And so that was the difference. When I finally, I failed a lot of times and I didn't know where I'd find my success. And then all of a sudden I started playing with PCs and technology and it just clicked.
I've often wondered, you were talking about your business software,
right,
where you gotten fired. I often wondered, what they must have thought when they watched you skyrocket into the stratosphere of success.
Oh, I could tell you stories because there was a guy named Michael Humecki that was the president of that company. And long after the store closed, he sent me a letter asking me to invest in one of his companies. And it was a stupid idea. So I had to tell him. So he followed me, and I was kind of grateful. But, you know, that's the way it goes.
Well, from your accomplishments in business and in life, what do you take the most pride in?
After my family, I would say that I was never afraid to fail. And then I loved every minute of it. You know, that's not to say there weren't times where there was a lot of stress. There weren't times when I thought we were going out of business. There weren't times where I was scared out of my mind. There were. But just the juice of just competing. You know, it's you against the world. It's your idea, and can you prove it right? It's you walking into a customer to say, my solution is better than the next guy's, and I'm going to prove it to you. You know, you may not believe in me because I'm 21, or now you may not believe in me because I'm older than everybody and don't think I get the technology, but I'm going to prove it to you that I do understand it. And, you know, I'm proud of the fact that I always put myself in the customer's shoes, and I always worked hard to excel in whatever our companies did. And you know, that's just rewarding.
Anything that you wish you could get a do-over, any regrets or a second bite at the apple?
Not really. You know, I tell my dad, when I die, I want to come back as me. You know, it's just, because mistakes are just part of the game. You know, I've had money stolen from me. I've had, you know, government agencies come after me. I've had, you know, but I've been honest and above board on everything, and I've worked my ass off, and you know, the people who have supported me have been rewarded, and you know, I've never taken anything from anybody that I didn't, you know, give back on, and you know, I feel good. Again, I'm not far from perfect. I'm sure there's people who have worked for me who would say, he was a lousy boss, but you know, I learned from my mistakes.
Do you still hold the world record for the largest e-commerce?
I think so. You know, it's funny because I didn't even look at it that way. I just thought it was, you know, practicing what I preached when I bought the Gulfstream online. And then one of my buddies, one of my drinking buddies, came into me one day with a Guinness World Book Records book and said, "Oh, you're in it, you're in it, you're in it." And I'm like, "For what?" And I was like, "For the largest online purchase." But yeah, that's cool, and it's something I'm proud of. But
so a lot of people got to learn who Mark Cuban was.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I guess.
Well, what's it like being famous or infamous? What's the upside and the downside?
I mean, the upside is you get good seats at restaurants, and you know, people tend to be overly nice to you. And I guess the downside is you have to, particularly at the beginning, you have to kind of negotiate things with friends and family, some ground rules that, look, you know, my bank account doesn't define me. If you treat me the same way you did when I was poor, we're going to continue to be friends. If you look at me as a meal ticket, we're not going to be friends. Our relationship has to be the same. And early on, that was difficult. I remember I had one friend who sent me a letter, didn't call me, sent me a letter asking for $275,000. I haven't seen him since, haven't talked to him since. You know, I have a lot of other friends that ran into rough times, and they never asked me for a nickel, but I was happy to help them. You know, but I volunteered to help. And if at the beginning it was a question of saying, look, just I'm the same. You know, my bank account doesn't define me. The same things I was stupid and goofy and idiotic about, I still am. I'm still a slob, and that's not going to change. You know, I don't want to, you know, I want to relate to my family and my friends the same. And if you can deal with that, great. And if not, you know, you'll just have to get over it.
Our previous cover story interview was with Ben Stein. And I have had lunch with him a couple times since, and your name came up. I told him that you were the next big story for us, big interview. And he told me he had fond memories of Star Search, where you were a producer.
Exactly.
And we were chuckling that you just didn't seem, you know, you have an obvious passion for production too, you know, HDNet, and, you know, where does that come from? That seems so different than IT.
It is and it isn't, in that I never visualized myself as a creative guy, you know, and I always felt that there were a lot of people more creative than I was, but I always felt that technology could radically change production and distribution. And so my partner Todd Wagner actually wanted to do the producing and from the creative side and get involved with creative people. And I was like, okay, well, if you want to handle the creative side, I think we can change the way movies are created and distributed, and television as well. And so that's what got us into HDNet and got us into 2929 and Magnolia Pictures. And we've always looked at problems, or looked at the way things always were done and said, can we do it better? We weren't going to be beholden to the old ways or the way they've always been done, and it's paid off. All those companies are profitable.
Yeah, Landmark too.
And Landmark as well.
Yeah. In what order of importance would you put when you look at technical understanding, instinct, creativity, or believing that you can do something? What is most important?
I think the most important is knowing your strengths and weaknesses and knowing what you enjoy doing. If you look at it as a job, you've already lost. It's not going to be your passion, and you're going to count the hours. If you look at it as something you love to do, and then you know what your strengths are, then you can leverage those strengths in your business and in helping others. And once you recognize your weaknesses, then you can work with people that complement you. I mean, every one of my businesses, I've had a partner who's very anal. Martin Woodall, Todd Wagner, I mean, incredibly anal people, perfectionists, because I'm a slob. I'm a big picture, think about what's around the corner, how's technology going to change things, how can I change, this industry, and, making sure that there's somebody there to dot the I's, cross the T's, and keep me in the baselines. And recognizing my weaknesses is just as important as recognizing my strengths and my core competencies, and having a passion to do them.
Well, you do think outside the box, obviously. Your entrepreneurial approach is not status quo. You push the outer limits. Anyone who's watched you in your career has seen that. I'm wondering, do you attribute some of your success to that you you blaze your own trails?
Absolutely. It's been kind of weird, even when I look at it, that one of my really strong strengths is being able to see around the corner and see what's next. And it's really just attributable to taking the time to learn the technology and putting myself in the shoes of various businesses and saying, how would I run their businesses differently? Whether it's, in the early 80s, being one of the first systems integrators for local area networks, when people were just saying, do I even need a PC? We were learning how to connect them and learning how to write software for them, and then taking that nationwide and doing it on a bigger scale than most, with broadcast.com, starting off as AudioNet, saying, okay, everybody else just wants to get on the internet with text. How can we take it to audio and then video, and what can we do differently? And even then, everybody else looked at it as saying, okay, you want to stream radio and television, kind of like YouTube is today. Well, that was a nice proof of concept for us, but where we really made our money was in the value of real-time communications. Things that we take for granted now, quarterly earnings conference calls, group meetings that are done online. No one had done those things, and we were like, okay, there's a business value. We can help make businesses more productive and more competitive and give them, a profit advantage by leveraging this technology, things that people hadn't considered. When we started HDNet, everybody looked at a high definition screen and said, that's $10,000. There's no way that's ever going to become ubiquitous or become cheap enough for consumers. I looked at it as a PC and said, look, it's going to follow the same price performance curve as any other PC, and it's going to get bigger, cheaper, faster. And no one believed me, and lo and behold, it happened even faster than I thought, and that helped us create HDNet. Now with Magnolia Pictures, we're distributing movies where we're putting movies on digital VOD on cable and satellite and telco platforms for traditional TVs 3 to 4 weeks before it's in theaters.
Yeah, bandwidth's really changed the whole shape of everything.
And I think where I've looked at it differently than the rest of the world, even now, is everybody thinks the internet's the solution to everything. And my attitude has always been, if everybody's looking somewhere, that's not the place where the real solutions are. And right now, I think the best bandwidth and the most available bandwidth for content is on digital cable, satellite, and telco platforms. So we're taking our movies and making them available for VOD a month before they're in theaters. And so we don't have to spend the big P&A, the big marketing budgets. The cable and satellite providers do that for us. We're generating revenues before it hits theaters, and then all that word of mouth and discussion helps us in the theaters. So now, Magnolia in particular, almost all of our movies make money, which is unheard of. And so, my real strength has been able to say, just if everybody else is looking here, let's look somewhere else, and let's see if we can apply technology to do it a little differently, and look at it a little bit differently and a little bit cynically to change the model, and that's what's worked for me.